Good morning. And before we discuss politics, before we analyze the headlines, let's do something a little different this morning. For many Nigerians, this weekend will be a time of prayer and silence. Some of us will go to church, others will go to the shrine, to the mosque. Some will be at home quietly. Whatever tradition it is, permit me to offer a personal prayer from mine. Whatever your beliefs, I hope the desire we carry is the same, that Nigeria will heal. There is a picture in scripture I have not been able to shake all week. A lamb led to the slaughter, silent before shearers, a people counted, as the psalmist says, like sheep to be slaughtered. Sometimes I look at Nigeria and I see that lamb. We have bled in the north, we have wept in the south, we have buried our own in numbers too heavy to repeat on a Saturday morning. This week in Plateau State, another young Nigerian lost his life to suspected mob justice over an accusation of phone theft. Not after a trial, not after a conviction, after an accusation. No accusation should ever become a death sentence. When suspicion replaces justice, we all lose something. If we are the sheep, if we are the lamb, then I believe we have sacrificed enough. Lord, let this be the season you answer. There is a psalm where the people of God asked, "Why do you hide your face from our affliction?" That isn't unbelief. That is faith, honest enough to ask difficult questions. So this morning, Lord, I come with humility, not pretending we have always gotten it right, not pretending we deserve mercy, but believing mercy is still possible. Your word reminds me, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I stand not on my goodness, but on your mercy. And I pray that same mercy over our nation, because lament never ends in despair. It ends in hope. So today, I pray for Nigeria. May corruption not have the final say. May violence not have the final word. May fear not have the final word. May justice speak louder. May wisdom guide those who lead and courage strengthen those who serve. May every Nigerian remember that our differences should never cost another person their humanity. And because you are a God who not only comforts but restores, you promised through the prophet Joel, I will restore to you the years the locust has eaten. So restore the years terrorism has stolen. Restore the years corruption has stolen. Restore trust, hope. Restore Nigeria. Isaiah wrote, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. So today may light overcome darkness. May peace overcome violence. And may unity overcome division. May due process overcome mob justice. May mourning give way to mourning. As the psalmist declared, he makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. May every home know peace. May every child sleep without fear. Because justice is strongest when it is guarded by the law and not by crowd. But let me remind us before we close this prayer, after the prayer comes the work. My faith teaches me that faith without works is dead. Whatever you believe, carry this with you into Monday. Prayer is not where our responsibilities end. It is where our resolve begins. Our country cannot die, but it will not become the nation we dream of if we wait for heaven to do what we've been called and entrusted to do together. May we reject mob justice. May we reject corruption. May we choose justice over vengeance, service over self-interest. Because nations are not changed only by what we pray for. They are changed by what we practice. We're not asking for miracles that excuse us from responsibility. We're asking for the wisdom to do what is right, the courage to choose what is just, and the mercy to stay the course until restoration comes. For we know that after every cross, you will write resurrection. So hear this, Nigeria. You have been the lamb for too long. May this be the season you are no longer counted for slaughter or counted for harvest. May our children inherit not the Nigeria we keep apologizing for, but the Nigeria we keep praying and working for. His mercies are new every morning, and great is his faithfulness. May Nigeria be blessed. May Nigeria be healed. And may we never stop believing, and may we never stop building. And with that, I say, Amen. And of course, I did not come to church alone this morning. I am with Chiwete Oyema. Chiwete, good morning.
Good morning, Pastor Queen Celestine. But I must say, thank you so much for taking us to church on a Saturday morning. But, the thing is, it's good for us to pray, no doubt. We've been doing that for years, but it's beyond that. I mean, check this out. Nigeria is the country with the highest number of churches in Africa. We're talking about over 100,000. And if you look at it globally, we're top 5. We're number 5 when it comes to global, when you look at the countries that have the highest number of churches across the world. That's a lot. And it tells you that we have been praying. But I like the fact that you balanced it at the end by saying that we need to put in the work. And I think that is where I will hold on to, because over the years, we've been praying, there has been hope, and we keep praying. But I think it's beyond that right now. We need to find a way to put in the work. And when I say put in the work, let those who are responsible, I'm talking about our leaders now, let them take responsibility. Enough with the blame game, enough with the, hunger has been existing before I was born,
right.
I inherited insecurity from the last administration. We don't need that. That's not news to us. That's like preaching to the choir.
Like you said, Chiwete, you're completely right. It's not just prayers. We need to do the work. And like you said, we have thousands of churches. Maybe that's why the churches made it to the budget, but let's not go into that conversation. Let me come over and we start Breakfast Extra. Welcome to the Saturday edition of Breakfast Extra. Stay with us.
Morning, welcome to Breakfast Extra. Our name is Chiwete Oyema, and of course, let me usher you into what we'll be doing today on the show. We're going to be bringing another engaging lineup of stories, and not just that, conversations that will, of course, shape Nigeria, Africa, and the world. This morning, we will take you to a community in Kaduna State still grappling with the aftermath of a deadly attack, as we ask what more has to be done to keep Nigeria safe. And also, we will examine President Bola Tinubu's approval of expansion of Nigerian Army to 12 divisions and ask whether strengthening military capacity alone is enough to address Nigeria's complex security challenges. The political space, of course, is equally active as we unpack the growing debate around a one-term presidency, while scrutinizing the 2026 budget, asking whether government spending truly reflects the priorities of Nigerians and what greater transparency could mean for development. Of course, on Wellness Extra, following the recent observance of the World Hepatitis Day, we will discuss the burden of hepatitis in Nigeria and the urgent need for greater awareness, testing, and treatment. And on Focus Africa, we turn our attention to xenophobia and its impact on African unity, accountability, and regional cooperation. It's another packed edition with insightful conversations you don't want to miss. So I'm going to tell you right now, just do stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Now, before we go into the dailies, our last conversation for today is going to be about the whole xenophobic issue. Yeah. And I pipped into take 3, okay. And the whole, is it Kyla?
Tyler now.
Tyler, I said
Tyler.
Tyler. Well, and you how they're saying,
you don't listen to
I'm not an entertainment person per se. And I'm like, these are the issues. It's one thing to just have an argument with your neighbor, but you don't know how much is affecting every other thing. Now, of course, she's been coming to Nigeria, hanging out with the likes of Ira Star and Thames and all whatnot. And now this issue is affecting her career and also affecting us from enjoyment. So I just feel like this is something that really our leaders can actually sit down and sort it out. And at the end of the day, if we all just figure out what's wrong with our government and our community, everybody will be fine. Because now it feels like, we're going to go and steal, and we're wondering what opportunity. Let's not just It's challenging.
It's quite a sad story, honestly, because it's a different thing if you're talking about, okay, Africa, you know, against the other parts of the world. But now this is Africa and it's within. And it's quite a very, very interesting situation because Nigeria and South Africa are supposed to be one of the, you know, big names, or like I said, the big dogs, you know. No, the big dogs, even in Africa, when it comes to, you know, how Africa is set up. But to see that both of them looks like they're loggerheads now, it doesn't look good for Africa, especially if we're talking about Africa uniting. It's not a good sight at all.
Well, while we're hoping that that situation will change, let's dive right into the dailies. We're starting with the Saturday Tribune. Now, at the center of the Tribune, it says, Orire, ACF opposition ask Tinubu to deploy same strategy to resolve other abduction cases. You find that on page 3. ADC to president track down families of Kwara Borno kidnappers 2. Judicial Commission will uncover facts behind Orire adoption and strengthen school security, says Oyo government. And I feel like this was coming because, you know, it took about 50-something days for the teachers and the children to come back. And the people in the north is like, okay, what about us? So I believe it was something that was going to come eventually. And after that, below that, Alaji came from U.S. to form robbery gang in Nigeria. Specialist in snatching exotic SUVs using weapon shipped from America. You find that on page 7. That is quite disheartening. Seminarian disappears from bishop's residence in Benue. Diocese alleges adoption. Find that on page 19. And below that, no blood worth shedding for Osun election, Amopito declares. Warns election officials against political pressure. And IGP deploys new CP ahead of August 15 poll. All of that, you find page 19 and page 29. Chiwete, you wanted to say something about the Osun election?
Yeah, it's quite, I'm there thinking about it, if that's the right call to make in terms of changing this Commissioner of Police just barely 2 weeks to the election. Because I'm thinking, how will he be able to settle in and start to set up a proper team to actually oversee Osun State? I'm not sure. Osun State has not really been known for this high number. Yeah, much chaos when it comes to elections. So I'm wondering why this is totally different. Some are saying that perhaps it's because based on what people are saying, alleging that perhaps it's because maybe the governor did not join the APC. So maybe that's why, we're having this amount of chaos in Osun State. And it's quite interesting because days ago, the secretary to the government was actually arrested, and the police claimed they saw things like voter cards in his house, voting election materials in his house, photocopy machine, printers, and all of that, and he was taken into custody. So it's quite an interesting thing. We're barely 2 weeks to the election in Osun State, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. Definitely here at News Central, we'll give you all the updates.
You're right. The amount of chaos that's been happening surrounding, this whole coming election for 2027. It's just giving people reasons to raise eyebrows, to say, okay, what's going on? What's happening in Nigeria? And like you said, Osun is not known for such chaotic activities, especially close to elections. So it's something to worry about. Let's hope that the CP is able to come in and, do the right thing. Rounding up with the Tribune, it said court jails woman 7 years for injuring boyfriend's genitals in Ekiti State. I have no comment for that. And right at the top, Makinde inaugurates APM campaign council, seeks inclusive structure ahead of 2027 polls. And Awolowo Foundation opens nominations for 2026 Leadership Prize and Sectional Leadership Awards. And that'll be all for the Tribune. What do we have next?
Next is This Day. And there's a big headline here. It says, Supreme Court orders lawyers to stop using barrister as name prefix. Wow. This is interesting. After so many years, going through the rigors of Nigerian University, I'm just thinking, plus law school, at least let them have something to brag about. No. Because you see a lot of people do that. You say, no, call me barrister. And I think this is going to be interesting because in Nigeria, we're quite big on titles.
Yeah, that's
we're quite big.
Talked about
when I host events,
yes.
I take my time to ensure
Yes.
that I call people based on their title is very important in this part of the world. If you don't put that doctor, that professor, people feel offended.
Yeah, but if we're already in a country where people are misusing that, especially you did not go to school for it, you know, like the doctorate, where they talked about the doctor prefect, where some people were actually honored with them, so they're like, you know what, don't use it anymore, except you went to the school. So I don't think there's an issue in that.
What I think they should be dealing with right now when it comes to judiciary is, you see that wig that you people wear, that wig, take it off. It doesn't look good. It's giving 1800, right? Please take off that wig.
That was way.
If you look at American, judiciary, they come to court with suits, not that whole robe and that wig. That wig just looks funny. I'm sorry. Maybe that's all we should talk about. But anyway, moving on. DHQ, troops kill over 102 terrorists. Criminals apprehend 345 in July. Security Summit, federal government to establish regional database, deploy drones, CCTV in Southeast. Of course, looking downward of these days, you see NNPC's June profits rose 16% to 535 billion naira. Statutory transfers hit 6.29 trillion. Now, if you look at the top part of this day, it says, the headline that says, Nigeria's stock market delivers 58.9 trillion naira returned to investors in 7 months. Market capitalization climbs to 138.33 trillion naira on FX stability, strong corporate earnings. MTN Nigeria grows revenue by 26% to 2.99 trillion in the first half. So yesterday I saw a particular person, Ugo Dre, talking about, he was quite expressing how much money MTN has made in just half of the year. The numbers we're seeing are crazy. The numbers are numbers that companies make in years, and they've only made it in one half of the year. And when he was talking about that, I could not but remember you and what they did to you, weeks ago. But then again, we're not supposed to give out the names of that. But people like you who have faced issues with telecommunication companies, I'm just here thinking, does that explain why people use data now and they cannot explain why 20 gig is being exhausted in 4 days or in 2 days? But anyway, we'll keep it moving. Another headlines in the, as a matter of fact, I think we're done. Okay, one more. Makinde inaugurates Judicial Commission of Inquiry into Orire abduction, which is, of course, that's the last headline we'll take on this day.
Well, thank you for that, Chiwete. Let's move straight to The Guardian. The center says silence over state killings is Nigeria's real crime, says Shoinka. You find that on page 2. Military offensives against terrorists will continue, says Defense Headquarters, as it should. It should continue until it ends. INEC to publish Tinubu Atiku Obi's credentials today, August 1st. And we'll find that on page 44 to get the details. Senate probes Safe Schools funds and demands accountability. Find that on page 2. 2 Chinese nationals bag 50 years jail term for illegal export of Nigeria's minerals. Where did they get that minerals from? Is it in the communities that are going through the insurgency and the bandage issues? We need to find out where all those details. You find that on page 3. And federal government unveils electricity sector reform agenda and rules out tariff hike. We hope that is what it is. And on Shupo, police deploy new CP as party faults Oyebamiji absence at peace accord. And right at the top, after 8 years of infertility, mother-baby survived rare abdominal pregnancy. Quite interesting. Abuja at 50. What happened to Wike's promise? Question mark. And transfer of baton at JAMB. Oloyede's legacy and challenges before Segun Aina. I think that will be all for The Guardian. I think that's all the paper we can take this morning for the headlines. Now let's go on a short break. When we return, we dive into our first report on Breakfast Extra. Stay with us. Now let's dive into our first big report. The tragedy in Naridom community in Kauru local government area of Kaduna State has once again brought Nigeria's security challenges into sharp focus. In a devastating bandit attack, at least 30 people were killed, while homes and businesses were razed, leaving many families displaced and struggling to come to terms with their loss.
Now, beyond the heartbreaking figures are deeply personal stories of survival, grief, and resilience. For many residents, the attack has not only taken loved ones, but also destroyed livelihoods, raising fresh concerns about the protection of vulnerable communities and the support available to victims in the aftermath of such violence. Our correspondent Stephen Enoch traveled to Naridom to witness the aftermath firsthand and speaks with survivors, of course, and also about the realities that they now face. He joins us now to share more about that, what he saw on ground, and the stories that couldn't be, of course, fully captured in his report. But before we talk to Stephen, let's bring you this report.
Alice Emmanuel is still coming to terms with the reality that 5 of her children were killed in one night.
The Fulani men came. They started gunshot as they came into my house through the window.
So how sure are you they're Fulani men? How do you know they're Fulani men?
They speak their language. They speak their language. As they came inside my room, I saw them. 6 of my children were shot on the head. 5 of them were killed instantly that day. Then 1 of them is in the hospital.
The bandit that came here, they are over 100. But the one that I see them for this house, they are more than 20. So they killed 5 people, they injured 2 people.
Shine da safe na muka dawo, muna zaman nan ma yayi kuma za mu tashi mu bar gidajen.
According to the residents who reside in this particular compound, they said women from other neighboring villages came here to seek refuge, not knowing that the bandits would attack here. They came here and 8 people were killed. Just over there, 3 people were killed, making it 11.
Then killed my mother and sister of my father. They also killed our grandpa.
Most of the security came to visit us, and after when they completed their mission, they left. As you can see yourself, there is no any security, a single security here.
As they entered the church, they break the door, they entered and they sing song of mocking that this is the church. The church have nobody, they have nothing to do.
This is Kaduna Nursing Home, where the patients are getting treatment. Before nightfall, other residents were seen leaving the village in search for safer places. Residents are still yet to receive aid from the Kaduna State Emergency Management Agency as directed by the government in an earlier press statement. In Kaduna, for News Central, Stephen Enoch.
Quite a sad situation we've seen, of course, happen in Naridom community all the way in Kaduna State. But right now, we're going to have a conversation with our correspondent who was there to interact with the people who, of course, are in a very, very bad situation. Stephen Enoch joins us right now to talk about this. Stephen, you just returned from Naridom. Do you mind painting a picture for us? What was the atmosphere like when you arrived, and what struck you most about the community?
Well, when I arrived in Naridom, the people there looked like they were helpless, defenseless, and hopeless. That is what I can say, because at that time when I visited the community, there was no military personnel on the ground. There was no form of security at the ground. But good news now. Okay, while we were there, they told us that the bandits had called them that they will come back again, and we just could spend a few hours with them, and then we left the community. So after we left, they called us that they could see the bandits across the hills, right? And after that, some calls were made because there's somebody who was with us, made some calls. And good news is that before the bandits could come to the community, the military had been deployed there. They were in the community. Yesterday also, I spoke with the residents there. He told me that even that yesterday, they had military personnel all over the place. The bandits could not attack them. And I'm so happy that, you know, we spoke about this. We made this go viral as possible as we could. They saw it, and we thank God that at the moment, the military personnel are there. The bandits could not come back, could not attack them again. So away from that, the people were very sad. They were very, very sad. There was a particular person who, you know, he lost 5 of his children, as you saw in the report. The man, he could not cry again. Even the wife, she was the person who spoke first. She was crying. There was no tears in her eyes because she had cried and cried her tears out to the point whereby she left the house. She was running like she was going crazy. We were not able to capture that because she was so sweet. She just left the grip of the people who were holding her. She ran like she was going crazy, shouting. People went, held her, and brought her back. That was the visual you saw first. So going forward, there was also a person who, you know, in the compound, 11 people were killed. Like I said earlier, people from other villages came to that particular village, that compound for safety, and they were killed. They were killed there. It's something that I believe the military should do much more better. They're doing their best because when I was going to Naridom, I could count more than 25 security checkpoints. But going into the village, that's where the problem is. The military post I saw at that time, it was a bit far, that's 3 kilometers from the village. And to be honest, the terrain is bad. Even if the military wants to fight, right, before word gets to them, before they would enter the community, because they're also suffering from, you know, lack of basic amenities in that village. There's no good road there. So before the military will leave their base and come down to them, the bandits must have finished their attack and, you know, left the community. So the terrain is very bad. Our car got stuck there. I was afraid at some point. Our car got stuck at one of the bushes, and it took us more than 30 minutes to get out of that particular ditch. So if the terrain was good, I'm sure the military would have responded in good time, because the military, I believe they're ready to work, they're ready to curtail these bandits, but the terrain is very bad. In fact, while we're going to the community, we had different checkpoints. They'll check our boat, know who is going in and out. But into the community, the terrain is very bad. Now, I also went to the place where the other, that is those who were shot, were receiving treatment. And I could not believe my eyes. Imagine children, defenseless children were shot at by bandits. Imagine removing bullet wounds from children's body. They're so traumatized. And the place they were at that moment while I visited the village was Kaduna Nursing Home. There's no lights there. There's no running water. The toilet is bad. Like, it's not a place that even if I'm sick, I want to go there. But these are people who are really with bullet wounds. They're there. I believe, I don't know if the government knows about that, but they should be able to take them to a better facility. Going forward, while I tried to speak with the government, of course, I sent calls, I called, I sent text messages, no response. Well, but I thank God that now they are safe at the moment. And from what I heard from them, they had gotten some relief items, and it's something that we should be happy about. Also, there's something they told me as well, that sometimes when these people are caught, when these bandits are caught, after some weeks or months, from nowhere, you see them again. They told me, they gave me the picture of a particular person, that this guy, he has been caught more than one time. And after some weeks, they saw him somewhere around. And it's something that's very frightening, because, okay, when you tell them, okay, this is the person that's attacking us, and they arrest the person, and the person comes back, he will come for you. Definitely. I also got to understand that, these bandits are people who attack senselessly. Like the first woman who I spoke with, she was breastfeeding her baby. And when they came, her husband broke the window. He ran out of the house. And then it was when he went to the bush, he remembered, oh, I have a wife, I have children. And he could not come back to save them because the bandits were looking for him. His saving grace was that the bandits didn't come with torchlights. So his wife, too, while she was breastfeeding the baby, she unconsciously, somehow, she didn't know how the baby left her, her grip, and she ran into the bush. She was crawling. And at the point where the bandits pursued her into the bush, that was when she told me that she remembered that she had children and a breastfeeding baby. And to her greatest surprise, the bandits shot the head of that little baby. It was only one child who survived in that particular household. The other household I went to, I couldn't visit all the households because it was somehow traumatizing. It's something that it's not good to see, but it's good that the military has responded now. And I hope that this issue does not happen again. And I know the government is trying their best. They're trying to make sure that all this thing is being curtailed. I hope and I pray that, their efforts really forestalls all of this, because it's not really a good story. It's not something that anyone would want to hear or want to be, want to experience, if you ask me, Chiwete.
Well, Stephen, let me reel you back to, you mentioned two things. You talked about seeing about 25 checkpoints before getting to the village, but then the road into this community was a bit terrible. Were you able to ask the security agencies why they don't have a permanent, security post in these communities that have a bad road? That is one. You also mentioned how they might end up, arresting bandits, and then days later, weeks later, you find these bandits elsewhere. Were you able to find out why that is? Is it that they hold them and then those bandits pay bail and they let them go? What is the situation with that?
Okay, so for your first question, the military, would I call it, it's like a base for them, the military base. So it covers different communities. So the military, of course, can't be everywhere. So while I went there, I saw the military base. It's covering a village, so many villages around there. So I believe if maybe they could have other bases inside those villages, because the villages are widely spread and scattered. So it's not possible for the military to be everywhere at all times, right? So from that particular military post to Naridom, it's 3 kilometers, and the terrain is terribly bad. It's terribly bad, Queen. I hope the local government chairman does something, or the person representing that constituency does something there. Also, you asked me another question about how. Sorry, can you ask me the second question again?
In terms of the bandits, you had mentioned the bandits.
Okay. Yeah. So they told me that that's from according to the residents. Once they catch one of the person who is suspected to be a bandit and is being arrested and taken away, the person, after some months, somehow, the person surfaces somewhere else. And they showed me, they sent me a picture of a particular person who is still in hiding at the moment. And he was arrested some weeks ago, right? So it is something that the military has to, I believe they can do better because they're trying their best at the moment. Also, there's this problem the military is facing with informants. Because sometimes before the military gets to a particular community, the informants would have told the bandits about their attack. And sometimes the military, you would not want to go into an ambush, because, to be honest, the military are trying, because for what I saw, they're doing their best. And sometimes these informants are the ones that are making the work look like the military are not working. I passed through a particular house. They showed me, that is the resident, they showed me a particular house that belonged to an informant who has been arrested. And that one, they didn't hear about his release or anything. So according to one official I spoke to behind the camera, he told me that sometimes when they have, planned their operation and they are going into a particular community, before they get there, maybe the bandits would have would have laid an ambush, and it just makes them demoralized. Because I saw many of these military, they're ready to work, but sometimes the issue of informants is what is really, demoralizing or making the work difficult for them.
Well, Stephen, one more question. You mentioned that, the government were able to give these residents in Naridom community relief package. What relief package were they? Can you tell us what it was?
Okay. I did not see the relief package because before I went there, the state government issued a press statement, and in the press statement, they ordered the Kaduna State Emergency Management Agency to provide them with relief items. But when I got to the field on ground, I did not see any relief item at that particular time. But when I left, that is the next day, they called me and told me that they have seen relief items, but they said it's from a particular organization. So I tried to ask them, is it from the government or an NGO? So because they have very, very terrible network there. So I couldn't know, I couldn't ascertain if it was a government or if it was from an NGO or someone who wants to just help them. But I know after we left, the community received relief items, but I couldn't ascertain if it was. I believe it should be the government, but I couldn't ascertain if it's the government or an NGO or someone who just wants to help them.
All right, Stephen Enoch, thank you so much for sharing your experience and for, of course, bringing those important stories to light. I'm really hoping that things like this or tragedies like this will be a thing of the past. But thank you so much for letting us in as to what happened in Naridom community. Of course, the tragedy in Naridom is another reminder that behind every headline are real people whose lives have been permanently changed. And as investigations continue and affected families begin the difficult journey of recovery, many will be looking to authorities not only for justice, but also for lasting solutions that can prevent communities from enduring similar tragedies. You're watching Breakfast Extra News Central. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Breakfast Extra. Now, our first big story takes us to security, which remains one of Nigeria's most pressing concerns, with terrorism, banditry, kidnapping, and other violent crimes continuing to threaten lives and livelihoods across the country. Now, as the government explores ways to strengthen the nation's security architecture, President Bola Tinubu has approved the expansion of the Nigerian Army to 12 divisions, with plans to boost manpower and improve operational capacity.
But will expanding the army be enough to address Nigeria's security challenges, or should equal attention be given to intelligence gathering, policing, and broader security reforms? Joining us for this conversation is a security analyst at Darlington Moro. Mr. Moro, good morning, and thank you for joining us from church up until now.
I like that. I like that you added church.
I did.
And then you're moving now to security.
Oh,
but
yes.
I'm just wondering how you combine both.
Very, very simple. Church, we go to pray. Every other person who have different beliefs, we always pray for something good. We always pray. But of course, we're humans. We're not spirits living in the world. So while we're praying, we also have to do something. Now, the president is saying he wants to, increase the division of the army. What do you think about that? Is it good? Are we going to attain that promise or that reform in 2026, or is it going to extend it to 2027?
I think that has been approved from 8 to 12. Nigeria has 36 states. And if we have 36 states and you have just 8 divs, this number of divs were inherited by this administration. We've had other administrations. We've even had a military man who became president, talking about Buhari, who didn't do anything about that. Now, we're talking about the military not being in every part of the country because of the numerical structure of the army. How many of them do you have in the military? Talking about the army, the navy, and the air force in Nigeria, manning 36 states. But we also have other intelligence agencies who also support what the military is doing, to push us somewhere. But I think the current president was indeed advised, to increase the number of divs we have from 8 to 12. And you would recall that for 36 states and you have just 8 divs, there's a problem. Now, even the 12, the question is, are they enough? Are they enough? The president did not just talk about increasing the divs, he also talked about the recruitment of some persons to increase the volume of persons we have in the military. That is a pass mark. Oftentimes, some of us have said that we do not have enough men in the military to tackle both bandits and the terrorists, all of them terrorists now. because the law court had declared the bandits terrorists. You recall when we were to get the Tucanos from America, the army, the military or the government had to go to court to say declare these people terrorists so that the Tucanos, the super Tucanos, could be used on them as well. If you recall, the Tucanos were not just sold to us. The Tucanos were sold to us with some conditionalities by America, who sold the Tucanos to you. They told Nigeria this is where, and those you could use the Tucanos against. I want to tell you that the 12 Tucanos, super Tucanos we have is good enough for Nigeria to take out another country. And then the question you want to ask with all of this, why do we still have this same problem growing, particularly in Kaduna State, in Katsina State, in Zamfara? I was in Northwest at the time, you know, at the theater to train some persons in terms of how to handle some of these persons. And again, one thing you must concede to the military, we were not used. I repeat, our military were not too used to fighting, taking out people who will fight the guerrilla warfare, what people will ordinarily refer to as the guerrilla warfare. But to the glory of God today, the military is being trained on how to tackle them. The guerrilla warfare means that you have a group of persons, they have their intel department who will go out, create intelligence, surveillance, and all of that, and then move to hit that part. By the time they are doing that, you expected that intel has to have come to the Nigerian military so that they will either be able to repel or ambush that team moving. But we suffered a lot, if you recall, when all of this started with Boko Haram. We first had Boko Haram. When all of this started, we suffered. Mines were planted against our military, who ran into them, and many of them were destroyed. But today, they are knowledgeable that these are the kinds of things they could meet in the course of wanting to take out these persons. And so there's that training. And then the divs now coming on, 4 divs. You don't just need divs, you need men. Now, if you station these men, if you take out of the ones we have and station in all of these divs, what advantages would we be talking about? We have, for instance, if you look at the states where these divs were planted, Kwara, Edo, Benue, and what's the 4th one now, in the Northeast. You discover that these are, in Benue, for instance, you have villages that have been deserted by the people. They've run away because of the, just like we're talking about somewhere in Kaduna State now where people were running away from. So if you have some of these divs, it means you are getting closer in terms of security to the people. And then you have men who will be able to respond, you know, quickly. And then talking about the numerical structure of the military, then the country now knows that we'll continue to employ more people. How many are the bandits? Yeah,
but when you talk about, you know, the people that we want to employ, talking about, they're now saying there's opportunity for the youth. But these youth don't look like they're excited to join the forces because of what we're seeing. They've killed a lot of, you know, our generals and all whatnot. How can we convince the youth to join these 28,000 people?
Convince?
Yeah.
Convince, you said? I thought you should be asking of how many leaves the military on a daily basis as a result of what you just pointed out. It's a problem. It's a bigger problem. It's a bigger problem, but it's improving. You recall once upon a time, some of our soldiers were escorted back into Nigeria by Niger Republic soldiers. Are they better than Nigerian soldiers? Because what they were given to face the terrorists was not good enough. Of course, you have to defend yourself to be able to come back to fight again another day. I think Bob Marley said that.
You talked about the fact that our Nigerian army are not, looks like they're not really trained for the guerrilla style of...
before,
that's before now. So I'd like to know, do you think that perhaps one of our major problems now is intelligence? Because if you look at even the conversation we had with our correspondents, you talk about the fact that there are informants in that particular community. So my question is, are we saying that when it comes to intelligence gathering, the be bandits, be terrorists are ahead of our Nigerian army when it comes to intelligence gathering?
No. They are not. I talked about how many they could be. Do you understand?
Yes.
I talked about how many they could be. Nigeria is a country. And then even with what we're discussing now, the military is still larger than the bandits and terrorists put together. But it's just that areas where we deploy the military, is it just areas where they will be doing precisely their constitutional rules? Or we are extending them to other places, other parts? And then you want to spread these same people, these same persons across the nation to be able to monitor a set of persons who are nomads. They are basically nomads, these persons, because they are not stationed in one particular place. Right. Because the moment they are stationed, now let me shock you. Let me shock you. Each time the terrorists attack, each time the bandits attack, it does not take the military so much time to discover where they are. But the basic challenge they have had, talking about the gallant military we have in Nigeria, is the fact that these persons have some humans who are not part of them. They use them as cover, as shield. So the military cannot attack immediately up until they are able to design a program where they'll be able to separate both the abducted from the abductors. So up until you are able to achieve that, separate them and know how to hit and where to move into, you will not do that. Of what will it benefit you when you go in, destroy innocent citizens, and then the international human rights bodies will now come after you?
Right. So, Mr. Omori, let's talk about, security as a whole. Let's use Naridom community, for example. In as much as our correspondent saw about 25 checkpoints before getting to the community, the road to the community was bad. Would you say border control and, good roads is also going to aid the security to do their jobs? Because that way, if we have good roads, they're able to assess these communities. And if we have proper border controls to be able to navigate all these communities, then it will be easier to, curtail this insecurity situation.
What our Nigerian military are exposed to is what the terrorists and bandits do not have. If the roads are bad, you go by air. We're talking about the military. We're not talking about the soldiers. The military, they have three arms. The Air Force that moves in the air. The Army, artillery, moves on ground. And then the Navy in water. Are you saying that we could not have chased them with an aircraft, knowing where they were moving to and knowing where they are, if there was appropriate information? And I heard him when he talked about those giving out information about our soldiers, about our military. Yes, it is true. Even within the military, we still have men who work for those people.
Bad eggs.
Bad eggs. And the military is doing everything to push them out. And of course, recently you are aware about one of the soldiers who was declared wanted by the army and eventually was arrested. That means that they have discovered, the soldier has long discovered that all of this existed. And then as much as recruiting is done, they also try as much as possible to profile everybody who joins the military. But this is not the basic problem. The basic problem, I have said in some other television stations that I don't like giving solutions. Because as much as we are talking now, too many people are watching. And you cannot tell precisely from who is watching. And then when you give solutions, they also find a way of running around it. But one basic problem we have that the UN has also discovered is the fact that you must cut off the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. Now, if you don't cut that off, and then they have so many arms in their possession, then you will be fighting a man who is carrying an ammunition. But if you are able to stop the inflow of firearms and ammunition, then you have reduced. Many of them will not go out without carrying the firearm. And what we hear at the end of the day is that they shoot this person was shot, and that one was killed. But the first thing Nigeria needed to do, well, that is basically the job of the Center for the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons that took over from the Presscom, where I served as a consultant. Up until we are able to reduce, minimize the number of firearms and ammunition within the society, I don't think we will be able to completely conquer this war. As much, look, you talked about the military men being killed. I was reading something before daybreak, and I saw a lineup of military officers who had been killed. Do you know what it takes the Nigerian government to train one military officer, just one? Just one. I didn't say 10, just one. It goes through the NDA. The NDA is almost like, what do you call it, when you don't pay school fees and all of that, you know. And then at the end of the day, they begin to send them out for different trainings, and then they go past, they take exams, they pass, and then you move them to the next rank and all of that before they get to the rank of a general. And then just one day, one hooligan picks up a firearm. Look at the colonel that was killed in Nasarawa recently. Apparently, the man didn't want, he acted like a soldier. And could he have fought all of them who came? He tried his best. He tried his best. Our military go out of Nigeria to serve in international bodies. When they come back with medals. That tells you that there's something in them. The same men you trained go out to join other men, even from America, from Europe. But they still came back with medals, particularly when they served under the UN, that will provide what they need for them. Is it that we have not been able to provide what we need for our men?
Talking about that, because that now brings me to having
It's
a conversation.
pity. Honestly, I'm getting emotional.
Sorry about that, but we totally understand why you feel that way. But can we talk about the welfare of our military personnel? Because, like you said, you know, it looks like there might just be a moles among the military. And I'm just here thinking that if our military personnel, perhaps their welfare is well taken care of, some of them might not be tempted to move to the other side. Do you think so?
When Mr. President became president, when he was elected and sworn in, the first thing he did with the chiefs he inherited, when I say chiefs now, I'm talking about chiefs of the military, Chief of Air Staff, Army, Naval, and then the Defense Minister. He talked about welfare. He did talk about welfare, and then he also talked about the clearinghouse, where we all sit down and share ideas. I have intelligence, I put it down, and then we look at who is supposed to pick up that intelligence from that point, and then go act on it, and then before it's handed over to some other person. I don't know if you recall about 3 years ago or when somebody was supposed to come from North Africa to hit Abuja, and then the intelligence was submitted, and then was handed over to another intelligence service. What happened? That service threw that information to the press. And then the moment the press blew it, it became a problem. Now they had to extend surveillance to air. That movement was supposed to come through the Sahel corridor, and then through the north, pick up some people. His name was given, he was profiled. His name was given, the vehicle he was coming with was given, the different international passports he was carrying were given. But when it was handed over to that service, what did they do? It was leaked. The press got it. And then the moment it was published, everybody wants to be the first to publish a big information. So that's why everything about the military is not discussed openly, where people are supposed to access them. Now, one of the things, back to your question, one of the things Mr. President said was welfare. But how much have we seen? Before the president, the current president came on board, how much was the Lance Corporal paid? With the rate of inflation in Nigeria, how much was the Lance Corporal paid? I saw the Minister of Defense when he was revealing how much this current administration had increased in terms of welfare, what these people were supposed to take home. But what they receive, the military, does it take them home? A Lance Corporal is paid 100,000 currently. Now, that was what it was increased to, from 40-something thousand. And we're talking about what? What are we asking states to pay workers? But how much of that welfare have we seen? Number one, how much do you pay them on monthly basis? These same persons might be the breadwinner of their family. The same persons could have wives or wife. These same persons have children. These children go to school. They pay school fees. You are not putting them in school for free. They pay school fees. These same persons will leave their families for a couple of months without setting eyes on them, or even years. These same persons stay without a roof for a couple of months, number of months. What food do you give to them? What is the assurance? What is the man who is not in the theater looking at right now to say, if this man sacrifices his life for Nigeria, how would my own be? So somebody talked about the youths, whether the youths are interested in joining the military. The youths from a particular part of this country are reluctant joining the military. Welfare. If the welfare, go look at the military man, you know, particularly, I said this, I think, on the news in News Central. Go look at the military man in America. You want to join the military. Nigerians are there, are part of the military in other countries. Go look at how they are taken care of.
No, Mr. Omar, you said literally almost everything in terms of, you know, the concerns of, you know, the citizens and, of course, the military as well. But rounding up this conversation, while we see that this has been approved, the 12 divisions and 28 personnel, would you say that this will be a focus for the government and this will start off immediately? Because we've seen in Nigeria where reforms are being approved, but it takes long time before we see the realities. Do you think it will start almost immediately?
I think so. I think so. It's a moving process. It's the government is apparently trying to see what they could do to either conquer this insecurity or find a way of reducing it. But from what we've seen so far, they are increasing and they are moving. Now the Southwest is on its feet, you know, trying to look at how to conquer insecurity spreading into the Southwest. But we've had them in different forms, in different grades, in different shades. In the Northeast, you have terrorists. In the Northwest, you have bandits. In the North Central, you have farmer problem. In the Southeast, you have another one. And then the government, again, is also trying to see what they could do. In the Southwest, we have both the bandits and the terrorists. Ondo State will tell you about that. Yes. Ogun State will tell you about that. Oyo State will tell you about that. Not much has been heard in Lagos because Lagos has...
Right, Mr. Omar, we'll have to butt in there because we need to wrap it up.
Let's hope it does happen on time. Thank you so much, Mr. Omar Darlington, for joining us and having this conversation. Well, you've heard it. Let's hope that, you know, peace comes back to our nation. Let's go on a short break. When we return, we start another story. Stay with us. Welcome back. The debate over single-term leadership has returned to the center of Nigeria's political conversation. It comes after vice presidential candidates of the Nigeria Democratic Congress, Dr. Rabiu Kwankwaso, revealed that the party's presidential candidate, Peter Obi, signed a written agreement committing to serve only one term of 4 years and return power to the North in 2031 if elected in 2027. These disclosures generated mixed reactions and several questions across the political spectrum, reigniting discussions about whether the issue is really about the length of time leaders spend in office or the strength of the institution that sustain governance.
But the conversation gained more attention after comments credited to Lagos Deputy Governor Bafemi Hamzat, suggesting that leaders should consider limiting themselves to a single term, a claim he has since distanced himself from, insisting that his comments were taken out of context. Beyond politics, the controversy raises fundamental questions. Is one-term presidency enough to deliver meaningful reforms? Would it strengthen democracy and accountability or undermine voters' constitutional right to re-elect a performing leader? Join us to examine whether a single tenure can deliver lasting leadership or not are Dr. George Agbakai, who's a APC chieftain, and Mr. Kennedy Nwankwocha, who's a Southeast spokesperson of the Obedient Movement. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on Breakfast Extra. My first question is to you, Dr. Agbakai. With the recent comments concerning this topic and also looking at where Nigeria is right now, do you think that a single 4-year tenure realistically can deliver lasting leadership in Nigeria?
Thank you very much for having me. You see, in Nigerian politics, it has become very clear that 4 years is not enough for a president to do a whole lot. This topic has been a topic of intense conversation in the past, in the past couple of weeks. And I've personally contributed, to this conversation, even in this particular platform, few days ago, So, see, we have a problem in the Southeast. This 4 years is unconstitutional. We believe that limiting the Southeast presidency to a single term, if implemented, would amount to another chapter of the continued political marginalization of the Southeast. See, after more than 6 decades, the Southeast deserves nothing short of full presidential tenure, rather than a symbolic or abbreviated stint in office. So far, the Southeast presidential tenure remains less than 1%, despite the Southeast being a significant component of the Nigerian population. So, voluntarily surrendering, as Peter Obi and Kwankwaso, as they are advocating, it makes us, feel weakened. Our bargaining power, our bargaining position in the Southeast is weakened. See, Section 137 of the 1999 Constitution made it abundantly clear that a president has the right, constitutional right, to seek for a second tenure. So anything less than that is to the detriment of the Southeast. So fundamentally, look at what we believe. In Southeast, we believe the best thing for us is to back the current administration's reform momentum. That's what we need to do until 2031, deepening integration into national structures, and now positioning ourselves as incredible partners. We need to emulate the Yoruba strategy. The Yoruba political establishment, they did it successfully. I remember around 2014, 2015, the Yorubas were frequenting Katsina, frequenting Kaduna, meeting with the northern establishment. People like Baba Akande, our able incumbent president, Chief Pius Akinyerule, Chief Osoba, they were going to all these places and, supporting President Muhammad Buhari in 2015. That alliance produced 8 years of northern leadership, which then paved the way for the Southwest presidency under President Bola Tinubu. So that is what we do. The politics is about reciprocity. The Southeast needs to emulate the Southwest. When we do that, definitely after 2031, when the presidency goes to the North, coming back to the South in 2038 or thereabout, it is now coming to Southeast. That is better for us. Any argument that the NDC, single-term arrangement should be shielded from an internal party, democracy is legally untenable. It's not an internal issue. This is a constitutional issue. That is what I want to say.
Well, Kennedy, talking about this, argument that Nigeria's challenge is not the length of time the leaders serve, but the kind of institution that we're in. What's your take on this situation?
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this morning. I think it was Walter Scott that said, what a tangle web they weave when first they practice to defeat. The question I want to ask, my doctor, call him Dede, is does APC have, in their memorandum, in their constitution, do they have a rotational presidency? And if they do, why didn't they zone it to Southeast, in 2023? Why didn't they do that? I think it was even so bad that Ogbonneonu was crying, where is the justice? He was crying, where is the justice? A little after then, he died. Even Buhari government even wanted Lawan to retain presidency. So why didn't Bola Tinubu in 2023, knowing like the history has just painted that the Southeast has not become the same? Why didn't Bola Tinubu, having come from the Southwest, where President Obasanjo, has done 8 years, and where Osibajo did 8 years as vice presidency, why didn't APC zone it to Southeast in 2023 when Ogbonneonu was there? This minister from my state was also. Why didn't they do that? The problem is that the Constitution of Nigeria did not provide 8 years tenure. What the Constitution of Nigeria provides is 4 years single tenure, which is renewable. And I'm glad he said he will seek. So when you seek, it means that it is not your right. Everybody has the constitutional right at that particular moment to seek. So you're going to seek based on your legacy, based on your performance, and based on the peoples of Nigeria if they are going to vote you in. So the people of Nigeria reserve the right to say, no, you have not performed better. Oh, no, we don't like to see your face again. We are going to vote you out and bring another person. So what the Constitution guarantees for you immediately you win an election is 4 years term. The question becomes, can 4 years be enough for somebody to perform? And I said yes, 4 years is enough. If 4 years is not enough, the framers of Nigerian Constitution wouldn't have made a 4 years single tenure. We might maybe tomorrow begin to say, oh, can we extend it to 20 years single tenure? Can we extend it to 50 years? Can we extend it to 100 years? But right about now, the Constitution says 4 years single tenure. And that 4 years single tenure is renewable, dependent on your performance and dependent on the voters if they are going to vote you in. So it's not automatic. But historically, there are so many presidents, because that's where the question should be, can somebody deliver in 4 years? And what the question we should ask ourselves is, what is it that Nigeria needs at this moment? What is it that is lacking in our polity that we need at this moment? But let us even go historically, like we copied our democracy from America. There are 5 American presidents, that did single. In fact, they campaigned that they wanted single tenure. James K. Polk, 1845 to 1849, did 4 years, and within this period, he vowed to do single tenure. He brought some agendas, brought Great Britain, brought Oregon, took Oregon from Great Britain, did establish single treasury. And it was even during the time of war, George W. Bush, 1989 to 1993. Jimmy Carter, 1977 to 1981. John Quincy Adams, 1825 to 1829. Rutherford, 1877 to 1881. If we come in our own side, Mandela did 4 years. And in short, Mandela, they were coming from apartheid, right? One would have expected that the first time that the blacks are getting power in South Africa, that Mandela would have stayed there for. Mandela did only 4 years. And in those 4 years, he was able to reconcile a nation that was, desperately needed unity. When this athlete, Dr. Yah will know about Sam Bakwe from Imo State. Sam Bakwe did 4 years. In 4 years, in fact, the legacy that Sam Bakwe kept in 4 years, the governors that came after him are still struggling today. Are we going to talk about Jack on them that from 1973? So the problem is not that the people we elect into position are not prepared. Like this APC, a good example is this APC government. These people came into government not prepared. It was Bola, one of their spokesperson today, that said even if you give them 30 years, they are not going to do anything. These people are confused. They don't have a vision. So it's not about the length of time. Can we deliver? What are the deliverables? What Nigeria needs in this moment is not about that we live in a lawless country.
Mr. Nkocha, permit me to butt in here. Mr. Nkocha, please permit me to butt in here.
So we need to bring the country together.
Mr. Nkocha, please give me, permit me to butt in here at this point in time. I understand you're quite passionate about this conversation, but let me ask Dr. Agbakai now. Dr. Agbakai, let's move away from regional politics and let's focus on leadership right now. Looking at what we have, looking at the uniqueness of the situations we have in Nigeria. Would a guaranteed single term encourage bold reforms and better governance, or would it remove an important mechanism through which voters, hold leaders accountable? So we're focusing now on governance now, not region.
Okay. I want to go back to what my colleague from the other side said earlier. He was making reference to some American presidents. But I want to let him know that some of these presidents contested for a second term and lost, just like Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter contested and lost the election to Ronald Reagan, just like other presidents he mentioned. The point is that 4 years is not enough when you consider the nature of Nigerian political reality. 4 years is not enough. When you get to power, you use the first 1 year, if not 1.5 years, to set up your government. And after that, you continue. 4 years has never been enough, and it will not work this time. The 4 years is to the detrimental of the Igbo people. Listen, other regions, they have done 8 years. Buhari did 8 years. Obasanjo did 8 years. Even Goodluck, under a difficult circumstance, did 6 years. And President Bola Tinubu will do 8 years. So when you want an Igbo president, a would-be Igbo president, to do 4 years, it is wrong. The Igbos oppose this vehemently. See, in respect of zoning that we are talking about, zoning, we know, is an informal policy of rotating presidential candidates between regions. And it's not a constitutional provision. Zoning, though, it has never been enshrined in the Constitution. And to an extent, it has guided the Fourth Republic polities. But we know that zoning also has limits. So what we need to do is to reach out to other ethnic groups. No single ethnic group can win the presidency of this great country. You have to reach out to other ethnic groups. We need to support our Yoruba brothers so that they can support us when it gets to our turn.
Dr. Bakari, I'm not sure you answered my question correctly. What I'm talking about is we're looking at governance now, looking at Nigeria's problem. Can 4 years fix it? You mentioned that it takes about 1.5 years to set up a government, and I'm wondering, why does it take that long? Because if you're prepared for a situation, if you say, okay, come vote for me, I want to be president, I intend to lead Nigeria, you should have your government planned already. Your list of ministers, people you intend to involve in your cabinet should already be fixed. So why would it take a president 1.5 years to actually fix his government?
It is very difficult. For example, when on assumption of office on May 29th, President Bola Tinubu, in the area of insecurity, he was beset by a constellation of deeply entrenched, mutually reinforcing, security pathologies. When you talk about the Sahel, the problem from the Sahel, the military coup that happened in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And now all those terrorists, because of the security vacuum, which came into being when the French and other European, partners went back to their country. So that's what I'm saying. Based on this, to fight insecurity in this country, there is no way you can fight insecurity under 2 or 3 years. It's impossible. The president has done a whole lot, to work on the security situation of this country. Look at the budgetary allocation since he came in to power. Currently, 5.41 trillion.
Dr. Bakari, Kennedy, I'll come to you, but let me just ask Dr. Bakari a simple question. We're talking about, changing our term, our one term from 4 years to 6 years. Now, in terms of your party, there's a confidence that, the president will win the second term. So why are we rushing to do this reform now if there's a confidence that what he's doing will still take another 4 years? So he's going to, have 8 years. So what's the rush to have this reform? Is it that, people are arguing so that, this election will be extended?
Which reform are you talking about?
Moving the term from 4 years to 6 years.
Well, that is left for the National Assembly to do it. The APC as a party has not advocated for a tenure of 6 years. We are only interested in President Tinubu winning the 2027 election and continuing the good work that he's already doing in the economy, stabilizing the economy, the microeconomic fundamentals, So, 4 years tenure, it will not work. Even if 4 years tenure will work, it will not start with the Igbo. We would complete our 8 years whenever it is our turn, as other ethnic groups completed their own. That is the question.
All right, let me come to you now, Mr. Nwokocha. Some people argue that a one-term presidency could create a lame duck government with, diminishing influence in its final years. How can a leader maintain authority and most importantly, push through difficult reforms under such a system?
Anyway, I think it was Macbeth. I don't know if you read Macbeth. He started with the story of the three witches, and he said when the three witches, promised Macbeth so much that he was going to be a king and stuff and all that. He later realized that it was all fake, and he said, "And be these jogging fiends no more belief. Who partner with us in a double sense? Who made the word of promise in our heart and break it in our hope?" The problem with APC is that these people are full of lies and propaganda, and you can't run a government with propaganda. You can't run a government with propaganda, and that is why everything you have seen, everything they have thought has collapsed. The problem this morning, the question this morning is, can 4 years be enough for one to deliver? All this one is talking about, there is nothing like Igbo presidency. It is Nigerian presidency, and even though we don't have in our constitution, there is this gentleman agreement that we have that power goes from the north and it goes to the south. And I asked him this morning, in APC, when is the time that power will now go to Igbo people? Because it's so much like Igbo people in this discussion. But in their own arrangements, even after this election, power is not still going to go to the southeast. But the problem is not about southeast or Igbo presidency. Right now, Nigeria is in a dire straits. Nigeria is drifting. I will need somebody that can arrest this apparent drift. And the question is, can somebody deliver in 4 years? And I've made examples. I talk about American presidents. I talk about Sam Bakwe. I talk about Jack Onde. I talk about even Yaradua. Yaradua did not even do up to 4 years, and he was able to deliver. What do we need today? What does Nigeria need today? One, Nigeria needs law and order. Nigeria needs transparency in governance. Nigeria needs prudent leaders. Nigeria needs wealth creators. People, you ask me a question, why would it take 1.5 years to set up a government? You see, when Buhari came in 2015, when this disaster that called APC started, it took him 6 months to set up and within that 6 months that he could not be able to form a government, the government drifted. This one came on the first day he took office. He said subsidy gone. That statement, that reckless statement he made, that policy that does not have a framework, that is not properly articulated, is what threw Nigeria into the chaos we are facing today. Today, Nigerians cannot travel on Nigerian road safe. The economic situation is there. Over 60% of over 68 million Nigerians are in abject multi-dimensional poverty. Nigeria is the most terrorized country in the world. Nigerians cannot feed. Nigerians cannot provide basic needs. And it pains me that elders like this will come to television station and begin, because they are party stalwarts, they are being paid, they are getting contracts and all the rest. They come to stations and say, oh, Bola Tinubu. It's not about Bola Tinubu. It is about Nigerians. It's not about Yoruba. It is about Nigerians. Right now, this country is drifting. Our country is going into the abyss. We need somebody that can come and arrest it. And that person must be somebody who has integrity, somebody who has prudence in management, somebody who can, bring Nigeria to a place where we can have law and order. If you don't have law and order, any other thing you're doing is babatage. And that is why this government, we are seeing fake agencies, we are seeing fake ministries, we are seeing fake directors. We cannot continue like this. So it's not about Bola Tinubu. It is about how do we get a Nigerian that can come at this moment, and begin to rescue this country, and begin to drive this country from a place of chaos to a place of sanity. We need somebody who has integrity. We need somebody, a wealth creator, and not people who don't know their name, who don't know the school they attended to, who don't know the state they came from, and when they get into government, they are not prepared. They throw the country into chaos. They are using government, they are buying private jets, they are painting house, They've even disconnected from Asurok to tell you the people who promised they are going to give power. They've built tenor. They've built solar in Asurok that worth over billion. They've bought rats and put it in the high sea. They've bought beasts. Everything they say, they tell you they do the other way. So this government has empowered them to suffer Nigerians. And Nigerians are saying in this election that we are going to vote them out. Thank God he said that they'll be subject to the election. Nobody is saying that Bola Tinubu should not contest. So he's contesting. Nobody's stopping him. So it's not about, oh, Igbo man has not become. No. We are saying that in this time, this moment, that Nigeria needs somebody that can come. And Peter Obi has promised that he will not spend one day. And within 4 years, he'll be able to bring at least 10,000 megawatts of power are distributed. He'll be able to bring sanity in government. He'll be able to bring prudence in government. He'll be able to bring accountability. He'll be able to bring law and order. The reason why countries are folding up and running away from this country is that because there is no law and order. These are the little things, low-hanging fruit that somebody can begin to pluck from day one. The problem with APC is that Bola said it. If you give them 30 years, they waste our time. Plug us in abject poverty, plug us in mass insecurity, plug us in mass debt. And we don't have, we should arrest this situation. We should have arrested it in the last election. We won the election, it was stolen. But this time around, we are not going to give APC 1 day after, after this tenor. We are not going to give them one tenor. So it's not about Igbo presidency. These arguments are not, are just.
So Kennedy,
like
in terms of these debates and in terms of this system that we find ourselves, would you say that we're trying to fix the politicians or we're trying to fix our political system?
We are trying to fix our country. What we are discussing this morning is about Nigeria. It's not about Bola Tinubu. It's not about the man sitting there between the station. It's not about Southeast, Southwest. No, it's about Nigeria. What is happening today affects everybody. Nobody buys food cheap from anywhere. Even the man who came from the West, the people are still suffering. I stood in the West and I saw, firsthand how people are suffering. So the fact that he even came from this, it does not benefit anybody. We need somebody. We need a Nigerian that have the capacity, the empathy, the compassion to be able to rescue Nigeria from this apparent. That is what Nigeria needs by now. After this time, we can begin to talk, should we have 20 years single tenor? Should we have 100 years single tenor? Should we have 1 year after this? But right about now, and that's what Peter Obi, and Peter Obi is making a sacrifice. Even the Igbo presidency is talking about. I asked him, why didn't APC in 2006, why didn't they zone to Southeast? Because I don't know whether it's from Southeast. Why didn't they zone it to Southeast? And I'm asking him, when in APC constitution, when are they going to zone to Southeast? In 2031 and after 2031, are they going to zone to Southeast? Because after Bola Tinubu, power will still go back to the north. Or is it saying that after Bola Tinubu, that power will come to the south?
Kennedy.
I said these people are confused people. They are wasting our time, and Nigerians have decided that we had enough of them since 2015 when they plunged this country into the disaster we are suffering today. Enough is enough. We don't have that time again.
Like you earlier said, this conversation is about Nigeria, not about the parties and zoning. But I want to say, Dr. Agbakai, thank you so much for joining and having this conversation with us. And of course, thank you, Kennedy Nwokocha, for having this conversation. It is not over. Elections are still a few months away. We will see the outcome and Nigerians will speak at the polling unit. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Now let's go on a short break. When we return, we start another conversation. Stay with us. Now, every year, the federal government presents a budget intended to drive development, improve infrastructure, and address the needs of Nigerians. But beyond the figures lies a crucial question. How much of the budget truly reflects the priorities of the people? Recent analysis by civic technology organizations have drawn attention to several proposed allocations in the 2026 budget, sparking public debate about spending priorities, transparency, and accountability. The conversation has reignited concerns over how public funds are allocated, the role of oversight institutions, and whether citizens are getting value for money.
How transparent is Nigeria's budgeting process? Quite an interesting question. Are the right projects being prioritized, and what role can citizens play in ensuring that public resources are spent responsibly? To help us unpack these issues, we're joined by Vaila Kwaga, who's the country director of budget, one of Nigeria's leading civic organizations promoting transparency, accountability, and citizens' engagement in public finance. Mr. Kwaga, thank you so much for joining us on Breakfast Extra.
Good morning.
Good morning, and delighted to be here.
Awesome.
Let's begin with the big picture now, of course, from budget to assessment. What stands out most when it comes to budgeting in Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think it's a good place to begin. What stands out for us is when you look at least the last 10 years of budgeting in Nigeria at the federal level, you see a high level of optimism when it comes to revenue projections. The medium-term expenditure framework, which is a statutory document meant to guide the budgeting process, has several parameters that influence how the federal government thinks about how much money it's going to earn. And we've seen year upon year how those projections have become more and more optimistic. We've also seen a growth in expenditure. We've seen a growth in first-line charges, statutory deductions, which are monies that are given out before anyone else, is given money. That's before any other Nigerian, quote unquote, is given money. And those are monies that go to the National Assembly, to the judiciary, and now to the development commissions. I think by and large, since this administration has, began, its work, we've seen a decline, so to speak, in publication of documents that are meant to show where the federal government is regarding its projected expenditure and its projected revenue. Now, I want to end by saying that a budget is a plan. A budget is not synonymous with monies already spent. How you know that monies have been spent efficiently and effectively, how you know that the federal government has earned the money it projected to earn, is through a budget implementation report, which comes out after 1 quarter, or an audit report, which comes out 3 to 6 months after the end of a fiscal year. Unfortunately, we've been running very late regarding the audited financials of the federal government. And recently, we've also been running very late regarding quarterly budget implementation reports. So it's very difficult to say where Nigeria is fiscally regarding its expenditure and its earnings. And lastly, just to remind Nigerians that the earliest or the latest budget implementation report we have for the federal government is for Q3 2025. And as many Nigerians are aware, we are running, 2 to 3 budgets concurrently. So it's very confusing right now to really say where we are as a nation as regards our revenue, our expenditure and our revenue vis-a-vis the budget.
Right. Now, recent analyses have highlighted proposed allocations for projects such as mosques, palaces, churches, town halls, and of course, it came under a cocoa institution. What concerns do these allocations raise, and how should Nigerians interpret them, within the broader context of the national budget?
So that is particularly an egregious example of just how messy the federal budget has become. And there are 2 key issues for Nigerians to really ponder over. One is an issue of federalism. The other is an issue of the constitutionality of insertions by the National Assembly into the budget. Now, when you look at it, it actually does seem quite ridiculous. What is the business of a Cocoa Research Institute that has an objective, that has a vision, a mission, a mandate, and establishing law to, construct infrastructure, and not just any kind of infrastructure, but, mosques and churches? Now, this is a direct result of what was treated with kid gloves during the Obasanjo administration, and what has quite reasonably, what we see today should not surprise any Nigerian. What we see today is a direct result of the issue that commenced during the return to democracy in 1999. Now, at that time, President Obasanjo and the National Assembly realized that they were at an impasse as regards passage of laws. And the National Assembly, of course, tried to force the hand of the executive, to let them see that something had to give if bills were to be passed, if laws were to be passed. And, that's strange. You are a legislator. You are earning a salary. You are representing your people. That should be enough for you. But they pushed, the Obasanjo administration, and he came up with zonal intervention projects, which were capped at about 100 billion. Now, 1999, 2000, 2001, even 2005, 6, 7, 100 billion was a lot of money. But the problem with that was that it seemed like the National Assembly was being given an inducement to pass the budget and to pass the laws. By the way, zonal intervention projects are not known to the Constitution. Again, giving the National Assembly that right to have a share or a stake in the budget that was not part of their, due allocation also raised constitutional red flags, because from what I read in the Constitution, while the National Assembly is allowed to increase or reduce the size of the budget via the mechanism of its approval of the budget proposal through budget defenses and rigorous testing, analysis, and evaluation of the budget proposal by the executive, the Constitution does not say anything about inserting projects, which this Cocoa Research Institute church and mosque building.
No, well, Kwaga, you had mentioned earlier that having the budget, like you said, these situations of the mosques and the churches is something that we're concerned about. The budget is just one thing. Another thing is having to spend it where we're supposed to have an audit. And now those audit reports don't come out as frequent as it should. Now, if we don't have those audits coming out, how are we supposed to know that the budget that was supposed to be spent was spent? How are we supposed to translate it in terms of our lives? Because right now, it seems that Nigerians are complaining and nothing is moving.
Yeah, so it's precisely through the budget implementation reports that I mentioned are mandated statutorily to come out every quarter. So we are supposed to have some fair sense at least 2 months, not more than 2 months after the end of every quarter, just how well monies have been spent and how well monies have been earned. But those are figures, those are numbers in a table. That's statistics. It may not speak to the lived experiences of Nigerians. And that is where the legislature comes in. The legislature, by design, historically, pick up any history book, legislatures evolved as a means to check the power of a monarch, to check the power of an executive, and to directly represent the people. Unfortunately, what we have in Nigeria today is a Senate and a House of Representatives that isn't particularly interested in testing, in evaluating, in holding the executive to account vis-a-vis the executive's role to implement public policy. Now, we operate the separation of powers. The executive implements public policy. The legislature serves as a check to them, monitors, oversights, approves the budget. The judiciary interprets disputes, between these three arms. However, the National Assembly has gone beyond its remit. It has abandoned the monitoring, evaluation, and oversight mandate it has, and it has instead begun to focus on basically proposing projects, which is a violation of the doctrine of the separation of powers. So to answer your question, yes, the audit reports are very late. And by the way, we have an audit amendment bill that is on the desk of the President of the Federal Republic as I speak. President Tinubu, this audit bill is on your desk. We implore you to sign it because we are still using a 1956 legislation for the audit ecosystem. Now, those budget implementation reports that I mentioned, even though they don't tell the whole story, they are also coming out late. So we have multiple problems. One, budget implementation reports that should give us a fair sense of where we are fiscally are coming out late. As I said, we have three reports due. Secondly, the National Assembly's role in providing respite to citizens through holding the executive to account. Now, what do I mean by that? The federal government intends to reduce maternal mortality across the federation, and it says it will spend 50 billion naira to do so. The National Assembly is meant to call for presentations, to call for evidence, to call for analysis from the executive every quarter at the very least. Okay, Mr. President, through your minister, please show us how you have reduced maternal mortality in my senatorial district. Say I'm from Kano. Minister of Health, please tell me how you have reduced maternal mortality in my federal constituency. I'm from Plateau State. This is how the National Assembly is meant to work. It's meant to go on site and visit their constituents and ask them, has the federal government done what it said it would? Has the federal government done what it said it would do? And then bring that back and then hold the executive to account through hearings, through presentations by the executive, and through all sorts of, exchanges and engagements with the executive. Unfortunately, we've seen the National Assembly resurrect that power in the recent PFIPC scandal. Yes, they have summoned a lot of executive officials, which they should. I think Monguno even threatened that the president would be impeached, which the National Assembly has every power and right to do. But what Nigerians want to see is less of TV charades and more of them doing their job. The National Assembly barely sits for 180, 182 days in a year, but we are not even feeling their impact even at that. And this really calls into question the nature, the quality, the structure of our democracy in Nigeria.
Mr. Kwaga, of course, that budget, you guys have actually always consistently advocated for budgets that reflect citizens' needs. In your own view now, what do you think about the 2026 budget? Do you think it reflects the citizens' needs? I'm talking about healthcare, I'm talking security and infrastructure.
Healthcare, education received very minimal increases. Infrastructure did get something. I think the top highest allocations for the 2026 budget was health, works, security, and I think education, if I'm not mistaken. And security topped that list. And, for good reason. Nigeria is really under siege at the moment, especially in the northern part of the country. However, that's just one part of the story. We tend to leave out the fact that we operate a federal structure. And it was one of the points I was making earlier, that it makes no sense that a federal government, through a Cocoa Research Institute, would want to build mosques and churches in local governments, which ordinarily should be the prerogative of either philanthropic associations or maybe at best, some public-private partnership. But I think church and state should be separate. But this really speaks to how our federalism has essentially collapsed, in the sense that we have a federal government that is literally implementing projects in local governments. And if you look at the budget, you will even see the language in the wording of the line items, specifically using federal constituencies and senatorial districts, which ought not to be. The budget should be a reflection of the executive's proposal that is coming from pressure being put on it from the legislature. There's a delicate relationship that those two institutions are meant to have. But going back to your question, again, the second part is the work of the subnationals, because you cannot look at the work the federal government does in isolation from the states, because these items, health and education, are essentially on the concurrent legislative list, which means they are not the only responsibility of the federal government. So what the federal government is proposing to spend and what the states are proposing to spend should be looked at together to really get a holistic picture of what needs to be done. But I will say that the federal government hasn't even properly identified or shown evidence as to why it makes or why it has made these fiscal decisions in the 2026 budget. Like I mentioned, the budget is meant to come from deliberations and debates on a medium-term expenditure framework and a medium-term sector strategy. That MTSS, or medium-term sector strategy, is meant to serve as a thematic guide that itself is drawn from rigorous evidence from the various MDAs in their implementation of public policy. So the Ministry of Education, Works, Housing, Health, in the deployment of infrastructure, in the deployment of personnel, in the implementation of the budget, should be collecting evidence as to how well they are meeting the objectives and targets of that specific fiscal year within the framework of that medium-term sector strategy. And it should feed into decisions on how much money will be budgeted for the next fiscal year. The example I gave about reducing neonatal or maternal mortality, for instance, the Ministry of Health, through the respective MDA that assigned that duty, should be collecting evidence as to how well the interventions are working. And that should form what enters the proposal for the next fiscal year. So if our interventions are not working, maybe we need to spend more on nutrition, we need to spend more on ambulance services, we need to spend more on nurses or hospital attendants. That should feed into the proposal for the next year. And we look at it from, a federal perspective. Well, we notice that in the Northeast region, neonatal mortality is coming down. In the South region, it's coming up. Can we direct more resources to that region? For instance, this is the type of rigor, this is the type of evaluation, this is the type of detail we expect the federal government, the executive to have. And the legislature must then also come correct in their analysis of how the federal government implements public policy. Quarterly briefings and presentations should be the order of the day, or maybe even at least once in every 2 months. The executive should present to the legislature, who are the direct representatives of the people, that this is how well we have implemented the budget for month 2, for month 3, for month 4, 5, and 6. This is the savings that we have had. These are the goals we've been able to achieve. This is where we have challenge. And that can influence the pressure that the National Assembly then puts on the executive in the development of the budget for the next fiscal year. But what we see is a budget that is basically a bargaining tool, that is basically a money-sharing device. And we have even noticed in our organization that the difference between the proposed budget and the approved budget has been growing. Of course, you can correct for inflation and even exchange rate depreciation, but at least nominally, the amount, the naira amount of insertions by the National Assembly has been increasing and has now crossed the 2 trillion naira benchmark or threshold, which means that the budget is basically becoming a sharing formula for the legislature and the executive at this point.
Interesting. In all of this, let's say, of course, technology has become an important tool for accountability. Now, share with us how budgets leverage data and digital platforms to, of course, make public finance easier for Nigerians to understand and engage with.
Thanks so much for that question. Budget remains foremost a civic tech organization, which means we look at how we can use technology to make things easier, to break things down for Nigerians so they can understand the context and ask better questions of their leaders. One of our, I think, foremost platforms is our GovSpend platform. Now, the GovSpend platform, contrary to what many Nigerians may think, does not create data on its own. The GovSpend takes data from federal government platforms, specifically the Open Treasury Portal. The Open Treasury Portal was the initiative of the previous administration through its then accountant general. And of course, it was due to some facility that the government wanted to have access to. The government had to make a promise to be more transparent, in exchange for some credit facility. Unfortunately, that platform, that's the Open Treasury platform, from day one had been rather problematic. Some of the links to monthly, quarterly, and yearly spending were not working. There were 404 errors. But by and large, from the year it was initiated up until 2023, 2024, it functioned relatively well. It showed you just how much the federal government was spending by almost every MDA of government. Of course, it didn't cover the entire MDAs of the federal government. In fact, it's disputed how many they are, but it did give some fair overview. However, with the entrance of this administration, the Open Treasury Portal has not been updated with new information, for several periods. And it was only just a couple of months ago that 2025 fiscal year spending data was uploaded on that platform, which means that our GovSpend, did not really have much to work with. And, by extension, the media and journalists and other researchers that use that platform did not have access to that data. But I'm just trying to say it wasn't our fault.
Yeah.
We crawl that data from the federal government. Another platform that we have is the Open States platform. The Open States platform essentially aggregates information on the 36 states of Nigeria fiscal public financial management data. So audited financials, budget implementation reports, proposed budgets, approved budgets, fiscal laws, laws on audit, laws on debts, laws on state planning are all warehoused under one umbrella under the Open States platform. And you can go there and take a look at your state and even look at your budget implementation reports as far as they are available online. that is there for Nigerians to use.
Mr.
We
Kwaga,
encourage Nigerians
Mr. Kwaga, I'd like to know, as we wrap up this conversation, what practical steps can citizens and even civil society organizations, especially even the media now, take to ensure that this conversation moves beyond criticism to sustained accountability and better governance?
So accountability can be defined as the disposition of a person who has a duty to perform, to explain and to provide reason for why they made certain decisions. Now, when you look at Nigeria culturally, it's not very clear if power or authority is used to being accountable. And, this has nothing to do with, the current administration. Nigerians, generally, we don't really have that culture of accountability for persons in power. Persons in power are usually seen as almost infallible. And, it's even difficult to correct elders, in most Nigerian contexts. So what the media can do is begin to speak on these issues and speak to how our values and our norms and the way we think about the world, the way we think about relationships between older people, younger people, people in government and citizens, military officials and civilians, all these types of relationships, there has to be some level of accountability for persons that have even some level of authority or power or some kind of oversight over another. With great power ought to come great responsibility. But unfortunately for Nigeria, what we see is the law of human nature that says power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it should not be surprising that persons in power do not want to be accountable because power does not want to be accountable. But what the media can do is begin to normalize this, preach stories on it, speak to Nigerians about it, get their views and express those views for others to hear. What civil society can do is constantly put pressure on the government through their various networks, through the work that they do implementing donor-funded projects, is to provide rigorous evidence, is to speak to citizens, is to bring citizens and governments together to speak where they can, is to provide evidence through policy briefs, through articles, to give the government a sense of what civil society is thinking based on rigorous, detailed evidence gathered by those civil society organizations. And of course, citizens can always use the power of the ballot. An election is coming. What has APC done compared to what it promised? What are other parties vying for your votes promising? And what has their track record been like? What are they willing to do? How are they willing to hold themselves accountable after you vote them to keep to those promises? And this should extend to persons vying for legislative office and persons vying for executive positions, and also to the judiciary. The NBA, the Nigerian Bar Association, should also put pressure on the justice system. The body of benchers, the various legal, institutions and organs should also put pressure on the judiciary to make their budget open. Because, as far as we know, the only budget that we can see in detail is that of the executive. The National Assembly under Saraki once opened their budget.
Mr. Kwaga. Well, I think we've run out of time for this conversation. So thank you so much. Mr. Kwaga is the Country Director of Budget. Thank you for sharing your insight with us. Of course, now we're aware and we will follow up and see where our budgets lead us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, as we've heard today, a budget is far more than a financial document. It is a reflection of a government's priorities and a measure of its commitment to public service. Transparency, accountability, and active citizen engagement remain essential if public resources are to translate into meaningful development. Now let's go on a short break. When we return, we start another conversation. Stay with us. And welcome back. My name is Queen Celestine, and these are the headlines. Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde has inaugurated an 8-member judicial commission of inquiry to investigate the abduction of students and teachers in Orire local government area. The commission, chaired by Professor Mojid Owode, was inaugurated at the Executive Council chamber of the Governor's office in Ibadan. Governor Makinde said the panel was established to independently investigate the the May 15 adoption at Sineli and Yawota community, stressing that the move is intended to establish the facts and draw lessons from the incident rather than undermine the work of security agencies.
It was an attack on the right of every Nigerian child to learn in safety and on the confidence of every parent who sends a child to school each day. We remain grateful for the safe return of the victims. Yet our duty did not end with their rescue. Rescue, of course, brings relief. I mean, I'm sure Prof and the rest of us, we are relieved. But truth brings closure. Accountability and reform restore public confidence and help prevent a recurrence. And because justice is not only about punishing wrongdoing, it is about learning enough to ensure that the innocent are never again placed in harm's way. That call was never about diminishing the efforts of our security agencies, whose sacrifices we acknowledge and appreciate. It was about ensuring that every lesson is learned and every question that deserves an answer is answered.
In judiciary, Chief Justice of Nigeria, Kudirat Kekereekun, has directed legal practitioners to stop using the title barrister as a prefix to their names in official engagements. The directive was contained in a memorandum dated July 13 and signed by the Chief Registrar of the Supreme Court, Kabir Akambi. According to the memo, the Chief Justice said the use of the title is inappropriate and inconsistent with the standards of professionalism expected within the Supreme Court. The directive appeals to litigation staff, legal practitioners, court registrars, and lawyers. To election matters, 14 governorship candidates contesting the August 15 Osun State election has signed a peace accord committing themselves to a peaceful, free, and credible poll. Incumbent Governor Ademola Adeleke joined other candidates, while some contestants were represented by party officials. The accord was facilitated by the National Peace Committee in partnership with INEC and witnessed by religious leaders, security agencies, traditional rulers, and other stakeholders. They urged political parties and supporters to avoid violence before, during, and after the election.
In the name of the National Peace Committee, I am making my special appeal to all the political party members here present to abide by the spirit and the letter of the accord that you will now sign.
These hotspots location will receive specialized, highly visible security deployments. Security forces have been issued strict operational guidelines to neutralize any form of violence and attempt at ballot disruptions.
All the people that will be involved will be the one recognized by the Constitution. People should not entertain any fear that maybe all these Amotekun, vigilante, and all others will be used.
Our gathering is to endorse peace, but my government and people are facing police sanction, violence, intimidation. War is being waged actively against my people by Osun APC, openly supported by the Osun State Police Command.
Governor Ademola Adeleke is behind all the killings in Osun State. He is the one that does not want peace. He is the one that does not want the people of Osun State to vote because he's afraid that the people of Osun State are going to vote him out of the government house.
Now, outside Nigeria, at least 27 people have been killed and dozens injured after a passenger bus plunged into a ravine in northern Algeria, prompting the government to declare 3 days of national mourning. The crash happened near the coastal town of Bomedes, east of the capital Algiers, after the bus reportedly veered off the road. Authorities say at least 39 people were injured, with 2 in critical condition, raising fears the death toll could rise. President Tebboune expressed condolences to the victims' families and ordered a full investigation, vowing that anyone found responsible would be held accountable.
ونترحموا على ارواح المفقودين، ربي يرحمهم. الضحايا هادو العدد هو 27 وكاين 39 مصاب. هذه الحصيله هذه حصيله مؤقته ورانا نبذلوا كل الجهود.
And that'll be all for the headlines. Let's go on a short break. When we return, Breakfast Extra continues. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Now let's talk about health. Now, viral hepatitis remains a major global health challenge, claiming lives despite being preventable, treatable, and in some cases, curable. In Nigeria, millions are estimated to be living with hepatitis B or C, many without knowing their status. Now, limited awareness or even low screening rates and poor access to treatment continue to fuel the burden of the disease.
As the world recently marked World Hepatitis Day, attention is once again on the need for greater awareness, early testing, vaccination, and stronger efforts to eliminate hepatitis as a public health threat. Joining us via Zoom for this conversation is the President, National Coordinator, Civil Society Network on Hepatitis Nigeria, Nseabasi Ekanem. Dr. Ekanem, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Now let's talk about hepatitis. Why does hepatitis remain a silent public health crisis in Nigeria?
Thank you very much for that question. Just to correct the fact that viral hepatitis is silent everywhere in the world. Nigeria is not the only country with high burdens of viral hepatitis. Countries like India, China, and other countries within the African belt are also heavily burdened by viral hepatitis. But for Nigeria, the challenge that we have is that the awareness is very low. That is a main driver of this burden, because people, in fact, statistics show that over 90% of people living with hepatitis, there's a difference between the general knowledge and the knowledge among the patient themselves. So people live with hepatitis, they do not know they have the virus, and they keep spreading it from one person to the other ignorantly. And that's what is happening. So in Nigeria, the awareness is very low. So that's why people ignorantly spread the virus to others. Second is that we have noticed from data that mother-to-child transmission of viral hepatitis is the most common mode of transmission. So a mother who is infected with hepatitis B, most importantly, transmits it to the child during gestation or even during delivery because of the blood contact. Unfortunately, a lot of these mothers are not even aware that they have the virus. And because they are not aware, they are not able to take the precautions that are necessary to keep their babies safe or protected against the virus. So we see increasing numbers of mother-to-child transmission of the virus. And this is so real because I have personally seen people, a lot of people, who have that history from the parents. And in fact, a friend of mine who actually bears my same name died in 2020. And when we did the history, we realized that the parents had hepatitis, and even 2 of the siblings also died of hepatitis. So we see an increasing trend of mother-to-child transmission. And that's why hepatitis B in particular is very high in Nigeria. We have 2 kinds of hepatitis that are very common and that causes chronic liver diseases. Now, those 2 are hepatitis B and hepatitis C. But while Nigeria has a high burden of hepatitis B, according to the Nigerian AIDS Impact and Indicator and Impact Survey of 2019, we realized that Nigeria alone has over 17 million people living with hepatitis B and just about 2.2 million living with hepatitis C. And the main driver, like I said, is mother-to-child transmission. There are other drivers, but for Nigeria, that is the main driver. And that's why, if you have been following the conversation lately, you realize that we are pushing more of triple elimination, which actually looks at eliminating HIV, hepatitis B, and syphilis. And unfortunately, again, hepatitis B doesn't have a cure, but it has a vaccine. We'll talk about that one later. But just to mention that the reason why there's a high burden of hepatitis in Nigeria is because there's a high level of mother-to-child transmission.
So, Dr. Ekanem, is Nigeria doing enough to improve hepatitis screening, vaccination, and most importantly, treatment?
I need to be careful so that
No, you can be honest. You can be honest.
Out there. Nigeria has done so abysmally, and I will say that as the national coordinator of the civil society on hepatitis. Despite all the cries, all our advocacy at different levels, I'll tell you that we have engaged even members of the House of Representatives and the senators. As a matter of fact, one of our senators, the deputy chairman, House Committee of Health, distinguished Senator Samaila Kaila, is our ambassador, is a hepatitis ambassador. So efforts have been done to see how we can get the government to be committed. But the challenge that we have with hepatitis is that we are not having a lot of funding from outside. And if you understand the Nigerian healthcare system very well, you notice that most of our healthcare spending is donor funded. That is the truth about it. So once we are not receiving resources from donors, it makes it difficult for the government to even demonstrate, commitment. When the U.S. foreign policy changed on, foreign aid to Nigeria, the government of Nigeria decided to step in. But unfortunately, and to our own displeasure, the government only focused on HIV and maybe tuberculosis. Even the First Lady, Senator Remi Tinubu, donated 1 billion naira for tuberculosis. Hepatitis was not even on the table. So Nigeria has really not done much when it comes to hepatitis. I can say that the best that we've done so far is developing policies. But policies lie there on the desk and gather dust, and nothing is done about it. I think it's time for us to move from policy to action. We need to implement some of these policies. Nigeria is one of the countries that signed on to that commitment to eliminate hepatitis by the year 2030. And each World Hepatitis Day, like the one we have now, it's a reminder to that commitment that we made among the committees of nations that we will implement all necessary strategies and activities to ensure that we eliminate hepatitis, whether B and C. Well, but unfortunately, financial commitment has not been matching that commitment that we made.
Well, Dr. Ekanem, you mentioned something profound in terms of, like you said, the commitment financially is not matching the reality of this illness in Nigeria. Maybe help us paint a picture. What does hepatitis B and C do to you? Because if you say tuberculosis and HIV is having more funding, it seems as though we're treating hepatitis as a common fever. Can you paint a picture of what hepatitis B and C do to your body? Maybe people will get to understand what they are really facing.
All right, so hepatitis B and C, unfortunately, are highly asymptomatic. And that is even the main reason why people don't really pay attention to it. Because most times, by the time the symptoms emerge, that means it's already at the end stage liver disease. But some of the symptoms that manifest in people with acute hepatitis are things like abdominal pain, very severe abdominal pain, In fact, in some cases, it can restrict some activities. Again, you see patients with the eyes colored, yellowish to greenish. That's a sign of jaundice, which is as a result of liver complication due to hepatitis. Again, in the long run, it leads to cirrhosis, where there's that, cirrhosis of the liver, where the liver, the soft liver, the liver, which is a soft tissue, becomes as hard as a stone. So nothing goes in, nothing goes out. And just to present some pretext here, the liver controls 99.9% of metabolism in the human body. Whether you eat food or you take drugs, whatever you take, the liver helps to metabolize it. Now imagine that that organ has been switched off. That's more like switching off life. Every year in Nigeria, at least 65,000 people die of hepatitis. Let me paint the picture very clearly. Maybe a stadium like Wembley Stadium or probably Stamford Bridge Stadium, a stadium that has 65,000 capacity. Imagine that stadium being gutted by fire and nobody survives. That is what happens every year in Nigeria. But because it comes with late presenting symptoms, sometimes people who die of hepatitis mostly feel that they die of malaria. Why? Because they have similar symptoms. The fever, the malaise, the fatigue, the loss of appetite, all of those are the symptoms of hepatitis. But unfortunately, those symptoms are also common with people living with malaria. And that's why people living with hepatitis, you will be treating malaria often and on. In fact, many a times, they keep treating malaria until one day their clinician or their physician tells them, why don't you test for hepatitis? And once they test, boom, you find out that they have been living with hepatitis for so many years. So these are the key symptoms that we find. In fact, you see in some cases where they urinate and the urine turns darkish in color. Even their stool turns tan in color. At the end of the day, a hepatitis infected person now begins to lose almost all of his strength. If you see somebody with liver failure as a result of hepatitis, he can't even raise his hands. He can't even breathe because you need energy to breathe. Your energy powerhouse, which is the liver, has been damaged. So what we are trying to say now is that let us not even wait until we get to that point where this happens, because in many cases, if not all, once liver cancer or liver failure sets in, there is no going back. That is a death sentence. I'm afraid to say that, but that's the truth.
All right, Dr. Ekanem, can you talk to us through perhaps if at all this contributes to hepatitis B? I'm talking about lifestyle now. Perhaps you can, let us know if there are certain lifestyle decisions or lifestyle routines that people live that could contribute to hepatitis.
Yeah, of course, there are lifestyle decisions that actually do contribute to hepatitis. And of course, those decisions are actually contribute to the risk factors. Things like, having multiple sex partner, especially when you do not know their status, is very risky. And that's why we preach safe sex. So once you have that affair with many sex partners, you are at increased risk of coming down with hepatitis because, like we said, hepatitis is not written in the face. So if the person you are having unprotected sexual intercourse with has hepatitis B, most importantly, then you are likely going to come down with the virus. And why I say hepatitis B is that studies have shown that while hepatitis B is 100 times more infectious than HIV, hepatitis C cannot be transmitted through sexual routes. But again, hepatitis B is enough threat. Another way is people who drink. Now, while drinking would lead to, non-viral hepatitis, like alcoholic hepatitis, it increases the risk of among people who are already living with the virus. So that is why we encourage patients who are living with the virus to avoid drinking. Smoking is the same thing. It also affects that. Now, for pregnant women, not attending antenatal care is a risk factor. Because if you do not attend antenatal care, you don't even get to understand or to know that you have the virus. That way, you ignorantly pass the virus on to your unborn children. So that laxity when it comes to attending antenatal care is one of those behaviors that drive most cases. Again, we have this apathy for healthcare, poor healthcare behaviors. For example, screening, regular screening. If you do not screen regularly, you don't get to know when you have the virus. And let me put it very clear here. Even if you are vaccinated against hepatitis B, of course, which provides that protection against the virus, there is still hepatitis C out there, which does not have a vaccine. So regular screening is something that is mandatory for everybody. So if you do not believe in going for screening, is a problem. I go to churches and I see people say, oh, I want to thank God that I did not go to the hospital this year. We shouldn't be thanking God that we did not go to hospital this year. You can't be saying that. Going to the clinic to see your clinician is something that you should do on a routine basis. But unfortunately, a lot of Nigerians celebrate because they don't go to see their clinician. That's an anomaly. And that's one of the factors that drives this too. Because you may be living with it and engaging in self-medication, not knowing that your liver is suffering. It is very, very important. Again, eating junk foods, though they do not transmit the virus, but they have the ability to worsen the progression of the disease. So these are some of the things that we must learn to avoid as much as possible.
Yes.
Because once...
Dr. Ekanem, I apologize for butting real quick, but we're running out of time. But in 30 seconds, can you tell us, in terms of vaccine, how often should they take it, and is it accessible?
Yeah, so for hepatitis B vaccine, it is accessible. But what we are trying to do now is to try to ensure that the supply chain and also the administrative protocol for hepatitis B is in line with best practices. For example, maybe this is premature, but we conducted an assessment earlier this year, and we discovered that in many health, in fact, that assessment was done in 120 primary healthcare centers. We noticed that the challenge is that they have what we call vaccination days. And that is not what it's supposed to be. Any child that is born should have access to hepatitis B birth dose vaccine on the day of birth. If you have a vaccination day on maybe a Thursday and a child is born on Friday, does it mean that that child will have to wait from that Friday to the next Thursday to have his or her vaccine? No, it's not supposed to be so. Yes, hepatitis B vaccine gives lifelong immunity, but it has to be given within the first 24 hours of birth. And that's why we are calling on all stakeholders, both those in the administration of this vaccine or those that are policymakers, to ensure that infants in Nigeria have access to the vaccine on the day of birth. The vaccine is there. It's just that sometimes within the facility, they start, because I know that the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency has a standing order that every infant must be vaccinated. Yes. But across facilities, we see variants and all of that. Well, so it is important that birth dose vaccine is given on the day of birth. And once that is given, it's a lifelong immunity against the virus.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nseabasi Ekanem, for joining us and having this conversation. Like you said, we should not just be having the conversation only when it's World Hepatitis Day. It is something that the government, the stakeholders need to look into and make sure that we don't have to lose a stadium filled of people every year. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. As Nigeria joins the global call to eliminate hepatitis by 2030, the message remains clear. Awareness, early testing, vaccination, and timely treatment can save lives. Now let's go on a short break. When we return, we have our last conversation for Breakfast Extra Saturday edition. Stay with us.
time for us to focus on Africa. Now, from South Africa to North Africa, attacks on migrants and foreign-owned businesses have repeatedly exposed the divisions that still exist across the continent, sadly. Now, for decades, Africa has pursued the ideals of unity, free movement, and shared prosperity, but xenophobia continues to threaten that vision. Now, violent attacks, discrimination, and growing anti-immigrant sentiments have left many Africans living outside their home countries feeling unsafe and unwelcome. Now, despite the African Union's push for greater integration, thousands of people across the continent continue to face displacement, economic losses, and in some cases, deadly violence simply because of where they come from.
And beyond the human cost, xenophobia raises difficult questions about justice, accountability, and the future of African solidarity. How much damage has xenophobia done to trade, diplomacy, and regional cooperation? And what practical steps must African leaders take to prevent history from repeating itself? Joining us to examine the cost of xenophobia to African unity and the way forward is Aaron Ngambi, and hopefully we'll be joined by Adrian Davis, who's the member and workers of and Socialist Party. Aaron is a geopolitical analyst. Mr. Ngambi, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, let's talk about this xenophobic issue. It's been reoccurring. What would you say is the cause for this reoccurring attack?
Thank you for having me, and it's good to be back on News Central. I think that the issue of xenophobia in South Africa has been ongoing for at least almost a decade now, almost 10 years. And it is very unfortunate that we're seeing this issue not going away. In fact, this year alone, the issue escalated to levels that we've never experienced before. So in the past, there's been pockets of xenophobia, there have been things that have happened, but not to an extent where we are now, where most of foreign nationals from South Africa were even expelled, passed out of the country, whether they're coming from Malawi or from Zambia, from Zimbabwe, from Ghana, from Nigeria, from all over the African continent. How we get here is very unfortunate because South Africa in the 90s, before the release of Nelson Mandela from prison and before they subsequently became independent, is a country that most African countries actually helped in their freedom struggle. Most of the Africans they gave actually homes to South Africans that fled and went into exile in pursuit to try to fight the apartheid regime. So getting to this place where now people that helped South Africa during those dark days being actually, persecuted and actually taken back to their home countries is very, very unfortunate. But, there are many things that can be attributed to what's going on. Some people have attributed this to the social and economic conditions on the ground, the fact that the economy of South Africa hasn't been doing very well for a long time. And because of this, the nationals, citizens of South Africa feel like they don't have a stake in their own country. This is primarily one of the reasons why we see this, this popular belief that foreign nationals in South Africa are actually taking our jobs. They should go back to their home countries. But outside of that, there's also this issue of how coordinated and organized these protests against foreign nationals has been exhibited. Because if you look at March and March, or March on March protesters, they seem to be very well coordinated, well-resourced. And the question is, who funds these protests? Who funds these activities? And I think that that is the question to get to the bottom of, because there are many things that can be answered if you begin to address a question like that.
My next question is to you, Adrian. South Africa, of course, has experienced several waves of xenophobic violence over the years. I want to know, from your perspective, what do you think continues to drive these attacks, and Why do they keep recurring despite repeated condemnation and, of course, government interventions?
That have been killed in the time of xenophobic violence in this country. Most recently, Emeka Charles Erupu and Musa Yunana Joe. It was pointed out that 98 Nigerians have been killed in xenophobic violence in South Africa since 2022. Every time that there is xenophobic violence, there is an economic factor, as the guests noted. 2008 was the first large one, but there were xenophobic attacks before then as well. And once again, there is enormous amounts of unemployment, enormous amounts of economic strife that is affecting the working class in South Africa. And that is being used and is not the cause for the xenophobic violence. And it is the position that certainly foreign nationals from other African countries, including Nigeria, are not the reason why there is so much economic strife. I think that we should also take into account that with Nigeria, we have a very good trade relationship. Enormous amounts of oil is coming from Nigeria, especially at a time when our usual pathways to oil in the Middle East have been cut off due to the invasion by Israel and Iran and United States and Iran. Also, a lot of the products that we sell to Nigeria are manufactured in South Africa, propylene polymer and trucks, $6 million US worth of wine, enormous amounts of fruit and vegetables. These are all things that are products of the working class in South Africa. The relationship with Nigeria and other African countries is the future for us to be able to grow production and create more jobs so that we are able to stave off this demagoguery by groups such as March and March.
Right. Now, Aaron, the AU has consistently promoted the free movement of people and, greater regional integration. Now, would you say that the AU has done enough to respond to these recurring xenophobic attacks, or should it be taking a stronger leadership role?
Well, I think that for any country, including South Africa, migration or immigration is an issue that is discussed and debated in many corners. There is no country that does not have illegal immigration. I'm actually right now in the United States of America, and that is something that we saw under the Trump administration, Trump 2.0. And so the issue is how you deal with migration, how you deal with immigration issues. I think it has to be pointed out that when you have these people go on the streets and just to harass and protest against so-called illegal immigration, the victims are not just people that are there illegally in South Africa, despite wherever they're coming from. Actually, the victims are even legal migrants, people who are there who have documents or papers that they're supposed to have, and even working legally in South Africa. Some of those are caught in the crossfire, and that is very unfortunate. The problem I have with the African Union is that we have a lot of good pronouncements when it comes to the politics, the policies, and issues affecting Africa. But then when you look at the implementation of most of these things, the organization actually falls short of actually meeting the expectations of what it was established to do. And yes, I think there's much that African Union can do in order to intervene in issues like this, rather than just letting things be. Of course, there's an issue of sovereignty, South Africa being a sovereign state, but still there has to be channels that can be used by the African Union to engage not only the government of South Africa and other governments across the continent.
All right, Adrian, some people believe, right, that, unemployment, inequality, and political rhetoric have fueled anti-immigration sentiments in South Africa. I want to know, how much responsibility do political leaders bear for changing the public narrative?
Responsibility for all leadership in South Africa, not only on a political level. On the political level, all the major parties are either completely in favor of the actions that are being taken, at least by the state, through tens of thousands of deportees, which has upscaled in the last year, the legal status of which we are not completely certain, and not sure if justice has been done. So I think that political leaders, with the exception of the economic freedom fighters to a degree, they have, pronounced badly upon this. But other groups which are in the government of national unity, such as Action SA and the Patriotic Alliance, have openly called for so-called illegal immigrants to be deported in very harsh and actionable measures. I think that there has been more fuel than water on the fire of xenophobia in South Africa from our political leaders. The ruling ANC has tiptoed around it. I think they're paying more attention to it, especially after the latest meeting by Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola with the Nigerians in Ikanale. The Nigerians full on said that all options on the table. And I think that has frightened the ANC and the GNU government. I think that more should be done by the leading ANC in particular, and perhaps more so by their liberal counterparts in the Democratic Alliance, should be doing more to quash this in terms of messaging. I don't think that there should be more reversed sort of pronouncements against these groups. A lot of these people are people who have been stirred up, as you said, by the lack of faith in further employment or social mobility, and would quite likely not be in favor of their policies to the logical conclusion, which is the deportation of all immigrants, illegal or not, from South Africa. I don't think that the distinction is being made by the groups, and I think the distinction should be ignored by political leaders. I think that there is a definite drive towards classifying so-called illegal immigrants as all immigrants. There's already been attacks, as the previous guest said, against those who are not illegally in the country, and there have been attacks against minority groups such as the Venda and the Tsonga, also known as the Shangaan, who speak languages that do not match the normal vernacular of Sotho, Tswana, Xhosa, and Zulu. So I think that this is even affecting South Africans, as well as South Africans that work with foreigners in South Africa. There are foreigners that rent from South Africans, and these groups are going to the owners of these properties, and then they are threatening the South African to stop the foreigner from renting from them, and instead they should be renting it to South Africa.
Right.
So all in all, I don't see any popular or positive outgrowth coming from this, and I think political leaders should recognize it.
Right. Aaron, why we find ourselves in this situation, would you say that these xenophobic issues is going to undermine investor confidence, labor mobility, and of course the fact that we're also preaching Africans' broader economic ambitions?
Yeah, I want to agree with Adriana that the political leadership in this situation has been very disappointing, to say the least, because it takes nothing but leadership, the right kind of leadership, to address the issues of migration, immigration, and xenophobia, as we've seen happening. And so, and like you said, it's only the leadership of the EFF, for example. I've heard Julius Malema on many occasions condemn what is happening on the streets of South Africa. And when you have a leadership that sets the right tone, you begin to actually yield better results. You begin to change the mindset of the people. You begin to walk back on some of these aggressions that we see. Yeah, so in terms of investor confidence, that's absolutely what is happening here, because South Africa will get to a point where people have to think twice whether they should move to South Africa and engage in any kind of enterprise, or they'll be better off to go to another country. So especially if you see what is happening to some of these business owners who are deemed to be illegal migrants in the country, where their sponsor shops are closed, or they're threatened, or they've been kicked out and taken back to their home countries. All of this actually contributes to a situation that leads up to South Africa being in a situation that they can no longer sustain economically, because this could even be worse than other countries sanctioning South Africa through economic sanctions. Now, I also wanted to make a very important point here, that, like I mentioned at the beginning, that to me, this seems to be a very coordinated, these activities that seem to be very well sponsored and coordinated. And the question is, who does this benefit? Sometimes we've seen from history that when politicians and leaders have fallen short to deliver on their promises and the things that they say they'll do for the people, they begin to use excuses and scapegoats. So they use one group against the other so that they conflate or deflect from the situation that they're supposed to be taking care of. The issues of unemployment in South Africa are very, very high. Therefore, instead of addressing those issues, it is more convenient for some politicians to talk about march on march or march and march, or talk about all these issues that are going on in terms of xenophobia. This is why we've seen some of the politicians, most of them, actually even not having the guts to condemn such acts of violence in the streets of Africa because they feel they'll be unpopular with the people. And on top of that, they have not delivered according to the expectations of the people. So they'll rather use this as an excuse and an scapegoat because it's convenient and they can retain power for as long as they can.
All right, thank you so much, Adrian Davis and Aaron Ngambi, for joining us on Breakfast Extra.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Now, we know xenophobia, of course, is not just an attack on individuals. It raises serious questions about Africa's commitments to unity and cooperation. As the continent pushes for deeper integration, many are asking whether true unity is possible if Africans continue to face hostility in other African countries.
Yes, we've come to the end of Breakfast Extra's Saturday edition.
Hooray.
But before we end, let's tell you that the views and opinions of all our guests are theirs only and are not associated with News Central. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back here tomorrow to talk to you on more topics. See you tomorrow.